No. Why is there something instead of nothing? Yeah, that age-old question. Before I logically answer this question, I want to clarify that if something came from nothing, then that nothing was actually something. It had to be something that has the capability to make something else. In science, we understand this eternal thing and or force as energy or pure energy. In fact, the first law of thermodynamics implies energy has always existed, but it doesn't clarify in which physical forms it rearranges into throughout its existence over time, of which it creates as well. I will be presenting a logical framework about energy that can have applications in sciences and humanities. We will be staying at a general level to critically examine the foundational logic of emergence and complexity. It's going to be fun. So let's get started. The first postulate is a universe where absolutely nothing exists because there is no activity or disorder of energy, meaning there was no symmetry breaking occurred, no symmetry breaking has occurred and will not occur. Okay, there we go. Symmetry breaking is a phenomenon in physics, but it's very similar to entropy, disorder, chaos, activity. So therefore, symmetrical energy cannot rearrange into matter, which means absolutely nothing would essentially exist. In this postulate, if symmetrical energy were to break the symmetry and rearrange into something else, like matter, then that implies a force of emergence and cause and effect innately exists perpetually, and that something, rather than absolute nothingness, will always exist in the universe. So, naturally occurring activity of energy leads to the second postulate. The second postulate is a universe where energy has always been in a state of activity. It has always had entropy that can spontaneously rearrange itself into all possible particles, antiparticles, their qualities, and potentialities. If we were to reduce this postulate to the nth degree, If we reduce this postulate to the nth degree, then we will have one notion to accept and/or we will have one option to investigate. The notion to accept is that energy has always been in a state of activity that can give emergence to matter, but doesn't need to give emergence to matter. Objectively, there is no intentionality for why matter emerges and continues to exist, except for because it does. That answer may seem uninspiring, but it is incredibly true and should resonate as such. The option to investigate is what is responsible for the constant entropy of energy. Answering this question will lead anyone to a paradox of infinity because we cannot answer it with phenomena that comes into existence thereafter, like galaxies, black holes, and gravitational waves. Whether one accepts the constant activity of energy and/or trusts cause and effect goes on infinitely, it does not matter because they are both equally correct. In the simplest sense, they feed into each other and materialize together. This is the nature of the universe, the literal paradox of existence, the nexus of all things, and it's logical. The third postulate is derived from the second in that particles and the emergence of plentiful matter is presumed as a likely result due to enough particle formation and interactions happening, time passing, and to subsequent gravitational waves increasing the disorder of the system that is the universe. Obviously, the first postulate is not correct because we and other things exist. So that means the second postulate of constant activity is correct, and that the third postulate intrinsically requires energy to be in a state of constant and potentially accelerating fluctuations that increase new particle formation. The second and third postulates do not define the rate at which initial particles emerge from the constant activity of energy, but let's presume that they do spontaneously emerge in a random position of the universe at any moment. There goes one right now! Okay, so this pattern of particle emergence would continue until enough compatible particles that do not annihilate each other, but rather connect, are close enough to become something else, and connect and become something else, like protons and neutrons. Even if the probability of initial protons and neutrons emerging from particles was 1 out of a trillion, eventually, many protons and neutrons would emerge throughout space, no matter what. This pattern of atom emergence would continue until random dust clouds aggregate to form proto-galaxies, which galaxy formation then takes the lead of emergence within the given galaxy's system. At this point, there would be one to, or I guess there could be. Anyways, at this point there could be 1 to infinite proto-galaxies scattered throughout infinite space, but there are no black holes, not yet theoretically. From unavoidable cataclysmic events, these proto-galaxies generate gravitational waves that increase particle formation, increase the activity of energy. Galaxies are not standardized. Evidence of random particles being made into galaxies can be seen when studying galaxies and their qualities. There are many types of galaxies, all having various amounts of matter, types of matter, and sources of radiation. Additionally, there are various the amount of visible matter varies, as does the amount of dark matter. Extreme differences of matter have been observed in the spiral galaxy NGC 4736, where the effects of gravity decrease further from the center due to the absence of dark matter, what we're calling dark matter. Another galaxy called Dragonfly 44 is as big as the Milky Way galaxy, almost entirely made of dark matter, but only emits 1% as much light due to its low amount of visible matter. Again, galaxies are not standardized, which tells us that the formation of galaxies and what galaxies consist of are also randomized, yet it's all calculatable, which means randomness can be predictable and that equations and compatibilities are at the center of the universe. A quick aside, the tool and capability that is imagination could be simply seen as the exploration of all possible mathematical relationships and expressions, such as dimensions, directions, equations and functions, and their limits, and what could transcend existing limits. People used imagination to build this very building, but before they could, a galaxy had to exist first, from enough compatible particles combining, then a habitable planet forming in a solar system, then biological life emerging on said planet, followed by billions of years of evolution. And all the while, the chaos that gave us existence has only become exponentially more chaotic, which is reality. So, now, regarding galaxy formation, a supermassive star at the center of a galaxy eventually goes hypernova, producing gravitational waves and creating a black hole that absorbs particles, radiation, and matter. This would subsequently happen trillions of times, if not infinite, along with all the other events that generate gravitational waves. Waves of space that go throughout the universe at the speed of light, that consequently spawn more particles in random positions of the infinite universe. And if more particles are produced and connect, then more galaxies would emerge into existence, and the paradigm continues like clockwork. I hypothesize that if more proto-galaxies emerge in this way, then previously existing galaxies would be displaced, generating a tremendous domino effect, forcing them in an arbitrary direction at an arbitrary rate, leading to more activity, collisions, and causes and effects. And if more particles in galaxies are emerging at a rate that they previously were not emerging at, meaning at an accelerated rate, then this relationship would help to explain the accelerating expansion of the universe that we attribute to dark energy. We could test this hypothesis by using better telescopes, better gravitational wave detectors, continuing to monitor the rate of expansion, and by linking calculated expansion with gravitational waves. We could readily accomplish such feats and more by working together, not against each other. So, all right. In physics, entropy is defined as the quantitative measure of disorder or randomness in a system. The concept derives from thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that when energy changes from one form to another, or matter moves freely, entropy, disorder, in a closed system increases. If this law applies to the universe, and it does, then that means the universe is a closed system. But because we know the universe is expanding, that means the universe is a dynamic closed system. Now, this dynamic closed system wouldn't truly be the entire universe, but rather something similar that I describe as a cycloverse. To explain, as a semantic note, the word universe means everything, and which implies infinity and no limits thereof. So, if there were ever to be multiple universes, then they wouldn't be universes by definition, because the universe would encapsulate those quasi-universes, and it is those quasi-universes that I describe, that I'm terming cycloverses. All right. So the mathematical and logical fate of all the black holes in the universe are the end and the beginning of Big Bangs, cycling Big Bangs that synthesize what I refer to as cycloverses. A cycloverse is a cosmic dynamic closed system of energy and matter in the universe that rearranges forever, containing an X amount of concentrated particles, galaxies, and black holes. And over an X amount of time, a behemoth black hole that has absorbed all possible matter and black holes within its relative domain of space will develop and will eventually explode to create the first Big Bang or another Big Bang of a cycloverse. This is the cycling aspect of the universe, fluctuating between singularities and polarities back and forth as a constant cycle. To quote a New York Times article about Stephen Hawking and other physicists, Stephen Hawking's equations showed that black holes would not last forever. Over time, they would leak and explode in a fountain of radiation and particles. The particles and radiation released from black hole explosions paradoxically existed before the black hole existed, which is why the Big Bang theory, inflation theory, string theory, and any theory centered around the beginnings of matter innately require that energy intrinsically possesses the capability to rearrange itself into something else, from ostensibly nothing mathematically to really something physically. Now, the larger a black hole becomes, the more it will warp space-time until there isn't enough matter to maintain its size. After eons of black holes absorbing one another, a behemoth black hole will emerge and will eventually evaporate to the point where it will explode due to its insane amount of entropy. And all the while, energy elsewhere is still emerging particles in random positions of the infinite universe. Referring back to the three postulates, we can confidently assert that the beginnings of matter in the universe and of any cycloverse could not have come from a Big Bang, but would have to originate from pure energy and enough natural entropy to spawn particles and so forth, which the arbitrary beginnings of matter are understood by the logical postulates. Now, I would like us to consider a perspective of quantity over quality, meaning what I'm about to describe has infinite quantity, but only appears to have conceptual and mathematical qualities currently. I would like us to consider the sheer quantity of infinite pure energy, visualized as D6 brains, which are six-dimensional objects derived from M-theory that are theoretically responsible for forming and shaping the qualities of particles. For simplicity, let's just view these D6 brains as tiny dynamic spheres of pure energy. The quantity of these spheres would literally envelop every possible nook and cranny of space itself. Essentially, infinite pure energy is space itself. Because we know energy must always be active, and not only does the activity of energy give rise to potentially more activity, but the fundamental activity of energy is only possible by this following postulate, the fourth postulate. The fourth postulate states that because infinite pure energy pervades everything, its total quantity of those tiny dynamic spheres would be in such close proximity to each other that they would inevitably interact, cross-exchange, and break symmetry of infinite pure energy. Meaning there would be an arbitrary synergistic energy exchange occurring. Or, simply, the universe is always having sex with itself automatically. So these countless interactions would be relatively weak and temporary, but based on our logic, mathematics, scientific knowledge, and apparent existence, we can assume or trust that these countless interactions are strong enough to maintain the integrities, cohesions, and functions of the universe, and to allow for the rearrangement of pure energy itself, consequently being the original reason and force of activity, change, and emergence of matter, along with its variations over time. To briefly restate the big idea here, the universe cannot help itself from interacting with itself at the most fundamental level. The absolute quantity of infinite pure energy and its subsequent automatic integration of itself is the constant reason and force to why there are different forms of energy being perceived in and by things energy has also synthesized from itself. I reasonably assert with these supporting four postulates that the automatic integration of the universe is just another way of expressing what the role of quantum gravity is supposed to mean and be in nature. Everything that does or can exist in the universe is only possible because the universe is literally based on a paradox of infinity, due to the overwhelming quantity of infinite pure energy. The universe is everything. It is an endless cycling entity where anything can happen anywhere arbitrarily and probable, and it all makes beautiful sense with such information not comprehended and comprehended simultaneously. Thank you very much.